Good morning. Today is November the 7th. It is a beautiful Thursday morning here in Columbia, 17th, I'm sorry. November 17th. It's 10 a.m. here in the beautiful area of Columbia, South Carolina. And we are at the DDSN headquarters here in Columbia. This is the South Carolina Commission for Disabilities and Special Needs. I am calling our meeting to order. And Commissioner Blackwood, would you mind reading the notice of meeting statement, please?
Sure. A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the November 17th, 2022 Commission meeting was distributed November 15th, 2022 to appropriate meeting and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs and Central Administrative Office and on the website. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackwood. The welcome this morning is to tell you all that we're glad you're here. I am excited to see all of my commissioners here today, and I appreciate the staff who have shown up to work with us today. And also we have some great input service programs that are going to be talking with us. And we've got a program from the Upstate also going to be talking with us for briefly. This morning, before you have an agenda. It's under tab 1 in your booklets, commissioners. I need a motion to approve the agenda as read. Motion, and we have a second, Commissioner Kerr. A motion and a second. So all in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. The ayes have it. The agenda is adopted. This morning we have Commissioner David Thomas, who will be doing our invocation.
Let's pray, please. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. We appreciate so much the wonderful staff at DDSN. We pray that you bless them, give us all wisdom and insight and the appreciation for the opportunity to serve. We pray for our elected officials of this state and our nation. And we ask that you bless this country and bring peace, please, to the Ukraine. Amen.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Now we will look at our minutes. They're under tab 2, 3, and 4 in your booklets. These are the minutes: 1 from the Emergency Commission meeting on November 9th, 2020, 2 from the Special Call Commission meeting and listening session of October 20th, 2022, and for the Commission meeting on October 20th, 2022. So if you take a look, if you haven't taken a look, I've reviewed them and I had one little change. Did y'all change that? The date, the time? It was the time on the speaking session ending. The only change that I saw needed to be made. Yeah, it was the time was weird on that, and that was the one thing that I seen.
That
Special calls and
new minutes in this packet.
I think it would be under,
Because it was definitely a separate one, the minutes were, and
here it is, I see it. Special call commission meet, no. That was it was the listening session was the one, I think, was the one that had the time mix up.
Under adjournment.
Yes, what, you got that one? Okay, it was a time difference. What was the time difference? Do you remember?
It says 9:44 a.m.
Yeah, and it was, because we started at 2. We started at 2 that day, and I believe we left there, we stayed for, you got it written down? Okay, good. Well, that will be adjusted in the minutes, just so you all know. All right, is there anything else that needs to be changed in the minutes as far as you all see?
We discussed one time about emergency versus special needs or special call. I like special call a lot better. Because
I do too.
emergency indicates you didn't have time to process the information.
Right. I get it. I agree with that. I agree. I prefer to have special called if time is available to do so and we don't feel that the health and safety of our consumers are at risk.
So there's a different criteria here too.
Yes. And if we feel that the safety of a consumer or a staff member is in jeopardy without a decision by this commission, then we call an emergency meeting.
It's a time issue too, right?
Yes, is a time issue. Usually, normally we could call a special meeting. If I got 3 days, I can give you 3 days, to call it. But if it's a situation of, okay, we've got to make a decision about this within 24 hours, we do an emergency at that point. So that's the only reason I would call an emergency is if the building were burned down or if, or if there's a safety issue involved. And that's why we had the emergency meeting. All right. Any other changes? All right. Hearing none, do we want to approve all the minutes at one time? Is that okay with you all as a commission? All right, I can see a consensus. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it and the minutes are approved.
Shouldn't we have a motion in a second and then you should?
Did I not do that?
That's okay.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve
Thank
the
you.
3 minutes on our agenda, 3 different dates or times and dates
okay. Do we have a second?
collectively. Second.
Okay, we have a second. Vote again. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? None. Okay, the ayes have it. The minutes are approved.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners update. We'll start with Commissioner Woodhead.
I just have been busy doing some adaptive sports events. There's been some rugby, there was a rugby tournament that attended in Atlanta, and headed tomorrow to Philadelphia for another rugby tournament. And another one is in Raleigh, the first weekend of December. So there's a lot of wheelchair rugby tournaments happening.
Great, and I would make sure to mention some of that to PJ, because I do want us as a commission and as an organization to help sponsor stuff like that. So I think those are important for us to get involved and do something like that here in South Carolina. All right, Commissioner Miller.
I will yield my comments as it relates to Beaufort County and their support for DDSN to our vice chair.
Okay,
But I was in attendance
okay, good,
and it was excellent. I enjoyed it.
good,
So
Good.
invite me back.
Thank you kindly, sir.
definitely.
We were happy to have you in our midst that day. And we had a wonderful presentation with the Beaufort County Council as they won our Golden Palmetto Award. And we were very thankful for the time that they gave us to to speak to them, me to speak to them, and Ed helped me out in the end to bring some loose ends around, and we appreciated that too. So anyway, we had a very nice meeting. I did want to, so whoever, there was one person I wanted to thank there that I didn't get the opportunity to do it. So if they're listening or somebody knows that they're listening, on the Beaufort County Council, which is different than all others in the state, there's a Beaufort County Council member that is in charge of DDSN, because Beaufort County does it, their board like ours, their board, unlike ours, is advisory. And so the county council member there is truly in charge of DDSN. So whomever you are, we would like to thank you for being that and for helping those with disabilities as best as you can in Beaufort County. And Beaufort County is extraordinarily good to people with disabilities. It really is.
It's wonderful.
So, and they employ lots of people, which is a passion of mine, which I put in the paper for those that, if anybody there saw it. I didn't actually see it. I hope it did make the paper. But they do a lot to employ people with disabilities within our county. So they're actually county employees.
Great.
So anyway, very interesting. It was a very nice meeting, and I'll move on.
Commissioner Thomas. Or?
I put my head in the sand and ignored everybody.
Oh. Commissioner Blackwell.
I wish I could do it on that, but I did attend the Charles Lee board meeting recently, and I thank them for welcoming me to the meeting and for meeting some of the great people that support the individuals in Spartanburg that utilize DDSN services. So
Wonderful.
that's my update.
Well, my update is, as you all can see today, I'm in a wheelchair. I am experiencing life as a person with a disability at this point. So, it's very different from being, non-disabled and then being non-mobile. So, I just want to, acknowledge the fact that I encourage any commissioner who's never spent a day in a wheelchair in South Carolina to do so. South Carolina is not as accessible as we think it is. We all need to really take the time to do that once in a while. Even myself, I always thought my house was very accessible. It is not as accessible as I thought it was. So, hopefully by the next time you see me, I will have a new hip and will no longer need the wheelchair. I'll be able to walk, but if not, I'll enjoy my life in a wheelchair just as good. So,
I don't mean to ask a personal question, but I mean to because,
go ahead, David, ask me, darling.
well, I'm just thinking of the interesting stuff. I've said that a million times and never have thought of that. I don't mean to, and then you do it. But the pain level, I mean, I'm worried about you.
I'm okay. The doctors have got my pain level under control as long as I'm in the wheelchair. When I get up is when the pain starts. So I have to kind of stay in the chair right now, and in the chair or in a chair, kind of at an angle a little bit with the foot up. And right now I'm in zero pain, which is wonderful. Those are wonderful days.
We love you. We've been praying for you.
Well, I ask you to continue to do that. My surgery will be on December 14th. And,
Is that the hip replacement?
it is complete hip replacement. It is. I was excited that they checked everything and all the infection stuff checked out clear, so I can move forward. So I'm very excited that we're moving forward with that.
You can write a book.
I will be, by the time this is over, I will definitely be able to write one. And and like I said, it's been very eye-opening to me as a non-disabled person to experience this life. And it puts gives me a whole new perspective,
Physically and mentally.
both.
Yeah.
Both. It gives that's something I just felt like as a group, you all should know that what I'm experiencing. And I think it's important for you to know that I'm experiencing what our consumers experience in some degree. So, all right. That's the commissioner's update. Today we have some exciting news, and we have public input section. Mr. Gerald Bernard with the Charles Lee Center is here, and I'm going to turn the mic over to him and allow him to tell us about something going on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. Actually, I have two real quick things. One is right after this, I'm running over to West Columbia because we're having our graduation. Human Service Provider Association supports a program to develop leaders within the organization, which is the Executive Leadership Academy. And they're actually having graduation, and two of the people that I work with are actually graduating. So I'm going to be running out. So when you see me leaving, it's not because I'm not interested in hearing what you're doing, but I can't be in two places at once. So I certainly want to make sure that you're aware of that wonderful one. The other thing I'm really excited about sharing with all of you is that the Human Service Provider Association is actually sponsoring the very first technology summit. More information is going to be coming about that. It's going to be held on January 25th. It's going to be in Drayton Mills in Spartanburg. We have some speakers coming in from out of state who are experts in technology and so forth. And we're hoping that Dr. Fry may be able to attend if that's possible and provide some opening remarks. But I just want you to be aware of it. It's the very first real technology focused event that we're doing. And what we're also very excited about, and that's news coming down the road, at our March conference, which is our provider conference that we do, we are doing an entire track on technology. And again, we're going to have a lot of speakers there. But what's also very exciting is we're going to have a lot of vendors there who represent the technology field who are going to actually be there to showcase some of the technology that's available. So I just want to share that information with all of you. And again, I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I won't ask them.
Is there a cost to attend, or do we need to register to attend?
You will get that information shortly. Everything is going to be done through a mobile app or online.
Okay.
And we're planning to have that out by the middle of December.
Okay, good.
So we'll be
I
sending.
know I would be interested in attending as commissioner, to see what's out there that we can take advantage of in our facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so all that information will be coming out very shortly.
Okay.
We're still putting the final pieces together, so.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if you will send this to PJ, and we'll make sure it goes out on our social media, and we'll do a press release, announcing it for you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
We're
Yeah,
happy to do that for you.
yeah. Thank you.
And that we'll get it on our website too, so that
Yes.
we make sure that
Yes.
people know about it.
Yeah.
Once you get your link,
Yeah.
send us the link, that way we can register for it.
And we'll make sure that, we'll get more information out as it comes out, and maybe with Dr. Fry and I, you and I can connect and see how that might work for you. Hopefully you can attend. Would love to have, the department supporting this, of course, as well. Because I think this is an important topic and certainly may help as we move along as a state.
This is something this commission has
Yes.
fully embraced over the last couple of years, and we want to see this happening across the state. And so therefore, this is exactly what we were looking for, something like this. And we encourage our IT staff and to attend, and our staff that wants to go, we encourage you to go and try to integrate some of this stuff into what we do at the DDSN as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your support.
Thank you.
And I know you have a very busy schedule, and I don't want to take any more time.
We appreciate it, Gerald. Any
Thank you.
questions?
I got
Gerald,
one
before
other
we leave?
thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, dear. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Very much.
All right, now we're going to move into our programs and services. We're excited at DDSN that we have finally moved into the next level. We've been RFPing and getting bids on different services that we've needed to do at DDSN for quite a while. This morning we have Ed Metric with us, and it's Gerald Kushar and Stanley
Rabinowitz.
Rabinowitz.
I have a lot more practice than you have.
Okay. Let's just say Gerald and Stanley are with us from Ed Metric.
Yeah.
And we're very excited to hear from them. They're talking about level of care need assessment instruments for DDSN. And we're anxious to hear about what you're going to be doing for us.
Michelle, you're going to start with?
So really excited to have Dr. Kuchar and Dr. Rabinowitz with us. We spent some time yesterday. Many thanks to Lloyd Warren and his team for hosting us. We got to talk with staff. We visited a number of different settings, and then we spent the afternoon at Midlands. So many thanks again to Gene Bowman and the staff there, and we visited a couple of different dorms. So we're really excited to have their expertise. And they'll tell you more about themselves, but they've traveled here from Boston and San Francisco, and we look forward to having them back again. But it's been a great kickoff. It was a long day yesterday, but a good day.
Thank you, Dr. Fry, Madam Chair, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're honored to have been chosen through a competitive process to lead this study. And we've had great support from Dr. Fry and the staff. The site visits we made yesterday were both exciting and reinforcing. My goal today is twofold. One, for you to walk away with a high-level understanding of what our study entails. Maybe more importantly, to be comfortable knowing that we're the ones doing it. So let's go right into that. You can see that's what we look like, is that we are here. Our founder, Dr. Carly Egan, was not able to make it, but she will be part of this process, and we'll talk about all of us here. As I said, we're going to do some introductions, and then what are our targets? What are that high-level understanding of our study? So why should you trust me? And then I'll have Dr. Kuchar talk about why you should trust him. And this is a matter of trust. I understand we're coming in. I get to go home tomorrow. You still have to be here. You need to know that you're in good hands and that the programs and the consumers that you care about will be well taken care of from the study we do. Dr. Fry, we saw the passion of the providers yesterday, and it was arranged from the state to the private. We see the need, we understand the need. And so we need to make sure that our study is consistent with their passion. It's consistent that they get the tools they need to not just do what they're doing, maybe do it a little better. Maybe some places that aren't quite as good as they are. can do their work a little better. That's how I see our study. So who are we? I'm the project director and lead technical advisor. Dr. Kuchar is our world-renowned content expert in this area. So we have a nice combination of, I know how to do this, and Jerry or Dr. Kuchar knows how to do it in this context, and both are very important. So who am I? It pains me or thrills me to say more than 30 years of doing just this kind of thing. I know you're looking at me, you say, no, can't be. It's actually closer to 40 if I really, but I can't put that on yet. I'm sorry. What do? I build and evaluate large-scale assessment and accountability programs. That's what I've done for these 30 years. And I'll give you specific experiences. And not just for a whole range of populations, including students with disabilities and adults with disabilities. So this is an area I'm comfortable with. It's not my deep area of expertise. I know how to do this, but I want to make sure we do it right for this population. And that's how we've brought Dr. Kuchar along, to make sure that our joint expertise gives you the products that you need. So what are my specific experiences? Before I joined Edmetric about a year ago, I worked for Pearson and in assessment. And these were real interesting times. I came right before COVID and left right after COVID. So I didn't really have a normal year at Pearson. But what I know how to do is build assessments, especially assessments that we want to have more electronic, more online. As we watched the proceedings yesterday, there's an interesting combination of high tech and low tech in terms of the intake, in terms of the assessments that were going on. But we want to make sure, either way that it's done, is that the records are kept properly and that they are accumulated into an electronic version that can be accessed. We understand the mobility of this population. That some get better, we're grateful, they go to a less restrictive. Some unfortunately decline. They go across different providers, from private to public. We need to make sure that we can keep those records in a way that one of the big concerns we asked everyone, so what would be better for you? How would your job be better? And all of them were confident in what they did, but many of them were not confident that the information they were receiving at intake was complete, was up to date, and was reliable. So part of the beauty of that visit yesterday is moving away from thinking there's going to be a magic tool that will do this job. Now, how do you make the process itself more standardized, more reliable, and more transferable? And that's where we've been thinking about this. So at Pearson, I moved tests online and I figured out, how do you work in really unusual circumstances, which COVID forced on our schools and forced on our employees? I understand the range of services, the range of different types of organization providing these services. In my experience through COVID and through for 30 plus years, will give me that experience to make sure that I give you the instruments and the process that you need. Just going down the list, I'm very proud of my career. I had the honor of spending 5 years in Australia running their national assessment program. That says two things, I think. One, I'm here to credential myself. People think I'm pretty good at this. And two, I can be fearless. I can go into an area and go into a new environment and figure it out and make it better because I'm not from that environment per se. I mean, Jerry has lived his 40 or so years in that environment. the fact that I'm coming slightly from a different, teamed up with that environment, I think creates a better synergy. I spent almost 25 years in R&D building the types of assessment programs, types of accountability programs, consistent with instrument development and validation. I'll bring that experience here. And finally, last but not least, I was a state assessment director. I worked for state government for 7 years. And I've worked with over 25 state departments of education and departments of human services and others over the course of my career, more than half the states. I understand, one, how government works, and two, how it's different in every state. And so I will bring that kind of expertise to this process that I know. And Dr. Fry, I know you've talked about what your challenges are working in the environment that you work in. I will bring my experience across different governments. Maybe we can do this a little better. This is how this state does it. But you'll have to do it in your context. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kuchar, and then I will come back.
Before you jump in, let me ask a question one by one.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay, real quick. The metrics part is measurements idea, and the ED part stands for what?
Education.
Okay, just educational in the sense of, I mean, we're not educational so much here, it's service.
It's the, yes. It's,
Okay, so how does that fit, the educational part fit with precisely what DDSN does?
most of our work is in the education space. But the metric part, the way that instruments get developed and validated and evaluated, we believe is universal and transferable. So while most of our experience has been in the education space, we believe that transfers, but we didn't think that was enough. And that's why we brought Dr. Kuchar on, to make sure that his expertise, which you'll now
I
see.
think he's written enough articles actually to how, you know, 350 articles. How many have you done peer-reviewed articles? Have you done as many as?
I've done peer review articles. I've got about a dozen, because that's not the one.
I'm kidding you, I'm just giving you a hard time, because I'm very impressed with the 17 books and 350 peer. You just don't hear that very often. That's outstanding.
Well, I've read 17 books.
There you go. Thank you.
I live more in the applied world. I make presentations at conferences. I work with states and I work with departments to make their lives better. Writing books has not been my passion. It's doing work like this has been my passion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kuchar, take the stage.
Thanks.
Way down. He carries his 17 books with him.
I'm delighted to have a chance to talk with you today. I think this project is very important because it's going to help you, hopefully down the road, do better planning by knowing the specific needs of your populations. My background is, did my undergraduate degree at Boston University, and then I went off to the University of Missouri, also in Columbia, different state. And got my master's and PhD there. And I hate to say, I started 50 years ago at Boston Children's Hospital. And my first job at the Boston Children's Hospital was in the Developmental Disabilities Unit, where I spent a number of years. It was a university-affiliated facility for developmental disabilities. I'm still on staff at Children's Hospital Boston as a senior attending, but I became chief psychologist and then ultimately fled managed care for a while into academic administration, became a dean at Simmons University in Boston, and then I took on a job as starting a College of Science and Health at DePaul University in Chicago, and then moved back to Massachusetts to retire and got bored. So I am now working as a program director for Capella University and running their online doctoral programs in clinical and school psychology. Along the way, I stayed licensed in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, and in Illinois, and I completed 5 board certifications, which I maintain current status on in clinical psychology, which was adult focused, clinical child and adolescent psychology, health psychology, forensic psychology and marriage and family couple psychology. I have done a lot of publishing in books. Part of that is when, when your job is full-time in a university, that's what you're expected to do. My favorite projects were the first ethics textbook in psychology, which is an ethics case book, now in its 4th edition. The Parent's Guide to Psychological First Aid, which is a book written for parents to help them deal with problems that kids normally encounter growing up. And also the Psychologist's Desk Reference, which is a compendium of resources that psychologists need to have at their fingertips. So that's me in a nutshell. Apropos of this project, I've done a lot of work on assessment psychology and understanding the right tools to apply for the right situation, and also understanding enough about the legal and public policy issues that are involved to be sure that the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed in terms of doing it right for the populations you serve. I met some of the folks from Edmetrics years ago working on Project Lead the Way to help evaluate school science curricula. And that's how I became connected with them. And my role, as Dr. Rabinowitz suggested, is to help find the right instruments to answer the questions that you need answered to use in your assessment and long-term planning of the populations you want to serve and what their needs are and how to keep that up. I'm glad to answer any questions that you'd like to ask.
What point in time did you add the extra O to our name?
Pardon?
What point in time did you add the extra O to our name?
The O was added to our name when my grandpa immigrated from the Ukraine and couldn't speak any English. And he arrived at the port of Boston in 1911. And he tried to convince them that he could work in the United States. And he spoke Russian. He said he's a kucher, which is a coachman, a wagon driver. And some immigration officer wrote that name down and it became the family name. I do have a brother named Gary.
Oh, great.
Cousins.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mr. Thomas.
I have a quick question. To explain the idea of forensic. I understand forensics, but forensic psychology, that's an interesting combination.
Yes, I got into forensic work because I was doing child custody evaluations.
Okay.
I sometimes served as a court-ordered mediator.
All right.
And also because I've published some books on ethics, I'm sometimes retained by attorneys in civil litigation where they claim that a mental health professional did something wrong or did something right, and they need an expert to come in and help the judge and the jury understand the legal fundamentals of the legal standards of care.
One of your books on that subject?
My ethics book in particular focuses on different cases that come up in a legal setting.
I like that. Okay, which one is that? That's the name of that
That's the
book?
ethics and psychology textbook.
Is it listed in here? Was
Yeah.
that not under your, okay, good, thank you. I'll buy your book. Is it for sale? I mean, can I buy it somewhere?
Oxford University Press is my publisher and they sell the books, but
I hate to think the price on this.
I'm not here to sell you books.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the team? All right, and you're gonna tell us a little bit about the plan, okay? What tool are we using right now? Do we have? a tool?
We are not using it.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought.
So there are 4 steps to this study. We're right in the middle of the first one. And that's the review of literature and states' websites. Basically, what we're doing in this stage is conceptualizing what would a valid, reliable, efficient, accessible tool look like. The goal is not, I want to stress something. The goal is not to find the one instrument that you should use. One, I don't think that's appropriate for your populations and for your range of providers. And 2, it doesn't exist. Now, if you want to pay me to build it, you can, but that's a different study. That's a different piece here. So what we're doing is threefold in this review. The first thing is using our joint expertise to conceptualize what would an ideal instrument look like? What are its characteristics? The obvious ones like It's got to be reliable. It's got to be valid. It has to be accessible. It has to measure the right domains. It has to be flexible for different populations and settings. You can see why choosing one instrument can be so hard here. It has to be cost efficient. It can't rely on someone like Dr. Kucha to have to administer it because there aren't that many of him. There are many more consumers than there are Dr. Kuchers. So it's this full range of what, if I were building an instrument from scratch, or if I were reviewing an instrument, what features would it have? So that's the first thing we've done. Now what we're doing is scouring a whole bunch of journals, websites, conferences, and a whole bunch of different sources to identify instruments and then apply their evidence against our criteria. Okay, so something like the CIS. We've done a thorough review. That's one of the easier ones to do because there's so much, it's so widely used, and there's a lot of evidence. There are others that have very little evidence, and we're not going to include them in your final evaluations because our mandate is ideally from a peer-reviewed source, and if not, strong technical evidence along our criteria. Because if we just limit it to peer review, a lot of these aren't done for publication purposes. They're much more practical purposes. But they need to have evidence. They need to have, who did you test this on? Is it fair for all populations? What's the age range? How many different domains? Has it been done on a bunch of different population demographics? There's a whole bunch of considerations that we're looking at. So step one was what are the criteria? Step two is the review. And what we will do then is take the hundreds of sources we've identified and kind of filter it down to a comfortable handful. We're thinking 10-ish plus or minus that we could present to you as models. Not as this is what you should use, but these are ones that pass enough of our criteria for you to look at. The third thing we're going to do based on that review, based on our criteria, is embed those tools, what I want to call the assessment process. What we learned yesterday, and it reinforced what we already knew, was that intake assessment is not just instrument dependent. There's a whole process that includes instruments, that includes individual judgments. It includes observations of the consumer, both before they enter the setting and they'll say first 30 or 45 days. What we will do for you is take those instruments and, as I said, embed it in a process that I may not want to call a gold standard process, but at least a silver standard process that any institution, any service provider can use to improve, either evaluate or improve their assessment process, to ensure that the consumer is getting the types of supports he or she needs, and that there's ongoing assessment to ensure that any progress or decline is noted and the plan that is designed for each consumer is up to date. So that's phase one. That gets us through January-ish. We're then going to work with Dr. Fry and the team to develop a plan to pilot this process, including potentially some of these instruments if they're already in place here, or that we can find some pilot sites that would want to experiment with the different instruments based on our recommendations that we developed in between the review and this pilot. So that's step three. That gets us to the end of June. The plan next year, which is not, we have agreed to do it, but you haven't agreed to let us at this point. If everything goes well, with these first three phases, first three tasks, there will be the actual pilot next year that we help design based on the criteria and the recommendations. And if Dr. Fry and the team and whoever's making these decisions like the work we've done, we will be asked to monitor the pilot over the next year. So in a nutshell, a review of what's out there, get rid of the not so good, evaluate the good, and forward to you what the best looks like, and here's why. Come up with recommendations for how you would evaluate an instrument, embedded within a process, and then plan a pilot for next year. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm going to reference your KPIs. I'm going to name 5 of them and tell me how many of them you actually will deliver to us. Revenue growth and what order? Revenue per client, profit margin, client retention rates, and customer satisfaction. Are we in any of those areas, all of the above, or a portion or a mixed?
I would say every one of them is relevant to the process, and to the extent that instruments provide that information, then that will be part of the review. I think for a lot of this, it won't be the instruments that provide that information. It will be the institutions' follow-up to that data collection through their own. Some of them are more standardized, some of them seem more haphazard, their own evaluation process. And that will certainly be part of our discussion. Not so much the instruments, which may or may not deal with those, but the broader process for intake and evaluation and assessment.
Based upon what you know already about this agency, what's your current assessment? Are we headed in the right direction?
All I will say at this stage is that doing this study is a step in the right direction. And I'm not going to move towards any recommendation. It would be premature to come up with any recommendations. And that's later on in our process. But this study is an important study. And what you will have by the end of this is an awareness of what best practice looks like and how it should be embedded within your various institutions.
The time period that you will be working on, you will be able to give us something. What's your time schedule looking like?
If you see there, we will meet those timelines because that's what we do. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, we have, as part of the accumulation of material and how to interface and all that, you've got here, I think most of us are very impressed with the staff that we have. And obviously our leadership is somewhat here in this room. Do you anticipate involving them and number one, local staff, that is, that we have here in the building and out there also? But also significant in my mind, and we've talked about this among ourselves in open session too, not just individually, but a compare and contrast between what other states are doing and what we are doing here. Do you incorporate the local as well as the outward bound in how you do this?
That's a very good question. So we take direction from Dr. Fry and her staff. They've given us our charge. We have bi-weekly meetings that we give our progress there. They have been wonderful at providing us with information about what's being used and how the programs work here, as well as their own knowledge of what's going on in the rest of the country. And we incorporate all that. We are not going to be giving you any judgment on governance. That's not part of our charge. What we will be giving you is, say, the state of Indiana uses this instrument and it's mandated. Say, I'm just coming up with a hypothetical. As opposed to this other state, Massachusetts, which doesn't mandate an instrument, but mandates a process. So we will be providing you the range of ways that instruments are authorized and monitored, as well as which ones get sanctioned and which ones are approved.
Well, that's interesting because it's just those kinds of things as the legislature is looking, Madam Chairwoman, at, they're going to be looking at legislation relative to DDSN. It would be something that during the subcommittee process, if we had some access to some of this information, we could say, well, in New Jersey, this is done. That would be helpful inside the body of the legislation if you could include that, California or whatever. What did I pick those states?
I was gonna say, take those states.
Texas and Florida do it
Yeah,
like
there
this,
you go.
like this.
There you go.
How's that?
That's better, David. Thank you.
We would take the best practices, bits and pieces from other states, kind of make the best practices of other states into a model that works best for South Carolina.
Yeah, well, the good news is for you that nobody does it perfectly. And you've got to be real careful mixing and matching because sometimes this best and that best doesn't fit. I mean, I love French fries and I love syrup, but I'm not sure I'm going to put syrup on my French fries. Some of you may like that, something like that. So we will make sure that as we look at best practice, that they're compatible with each other. Otherwise, you end up with a whole lot of, think of a sports team where everybody does their own thing and nobody meshes in that, or an orchestra where everyone thinks they're the first violin.
Now, this would fall under Lori, would this be under Lori's division long-term?
It touches all of us.
It touches everybody? Okay, I wasn't sure. And then, but it would eventually be, our enrollment intake process that would use this tool.
So the assessment process will inform, hopefully, down the road, the kinds of supports that we provide to people. Some of that fits in my area because the waiver administration and the waiver approval of service levels and that kind of thing lives in my area. But again, I think this assessment process is going to touch all of us in all of our areas, so I don't know that it really lives anywhere. I think part of the decision point, once we have a recommendation for the assessment tools and piloting the assessment tools, is to determine how we accomplish in implementing what said assessment tools are done, whether that's done here or whether that's a contract. So again, I can't really answer. I think it's more of
We're looking into seeing where.
Sure, I think that's part of this process is to figure out, what tools are out there, which ones we want to use, piloting them, make sure they operate the way we want them to, and then determine, who long-term will be the assessor, because different tools require different training and criteria for who does them, right?
That helps a little bit. I just did a clarification of where we would be.
Sure.
Technically, right now, this initiative falls under Harley.
Under Harley, okay.
It's to keep track of, when it's all said and done, is it to keep track of one consumer on what they've utilized, what's best for them across the entire platform?
Yes, it's important to note that the assessment tool, the assessment process is individual. It's not the institute. We're not giving a score or a rating to an institution or a provider. The consumer is the target. Yes, ma'am.
Based upon what I'm hearing and based upon those KPIs, the major driver comes through Dr. Fry because it has many components, if I'm correct in what I'm saying, based upon what I asked you earlier.
I'll defer.
No, I'm just saying from what I see, that's what I'm seeing because it covers the total spectrum and the total responsibility of DDSN statewide.
Yes. And I do want to emphasize that we anticipate, that we don't know until we get through these different deliverables, that what we will bring will not be a recommendation for one tool, but multiple tools with some sort of if-then framework for when various tools would be utilized to help inform understanding needs.
That helps me a little bit. Everybody else?
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
I just think what she just said is very important to realize, because people in our network need to realize it's not just one tool going to fix the problems that we have.
Yeah.
It's a very, very
I don't
customizable
know that
thing.
it's necessarily a problem, Barry. I think it's,
Problem with assessing people.
the problem is assessing people. It's not necessarily, I think it's more of finding out where you fit. You've got an umbrella of things that we have, and we've got to figure out, when this one person comes in, what part of that umbrella can they use, can be utilized? Is that kind of what I'm looking at? Is that a way to explain it? Okay.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your time and attention, and we hope to be invited back again. And should we come back, Madam Chair, we hope to hear you describe your successful surgery, and we wish and pray for you the best.
We appreciate it. And we do look forward to hearing from you. I hope that we can have you quarterly or so, come in and kind of give us an update as to where we are. Okay. Thank you.
Sir. Ladies.
Appreciate it. All right. Our next group, we're very excited. We've been working on this for over a year now. Or it's a year, because you came in October last year. Okay. So it's been a year we've been working on our strategic planning for DDSN. It's the Sage Squirrel Consulting Group, LLC. Shelley Reynolds, PhD, Senior Associate Director. And then Erica Robbins is also the owner partner, and they're with us online today. Welcome, ladies. Glad to have you.
So it's nice to be here. So Shelley's going to be pulling up her slide deck.
I was gonna just give a brief
Hold on.
intro.
I think Charlie's giving us a brief.
Sorry, I was asked to give just a brief intro to y'all. Good morning.
Sorry,
Apologies
I didn't know.
to interrupt everybody, but in October of this year, DDSN contracted with Sage Squirrel Consulting to facilitate the strategic planning process for our agency. And we're fortunate to have Erica and Dr. Reynolds here with us today to provide an overview of charting the life course framework and the strategic planning process that is planned for DDSN. So I'll turn it over to them.
Great, thank you, Holly. So Shelley's going to pull up the screen. And what we're going to do over the next 20, 30 minutes or so is provide an introduction to our project team, an overview of our approach to strategic planning, and then just highlight some things to expect in the weeks and months ahead. Do you all hear the echo, or is it just on my end?
A little bit.
Okay. Try my best not to make that worse. So what I'd like to do first is start with just some level setting. So when the RFP was put out earlier this year, what DDSN was asking for was basically some strategic planning guidance to develop a plan that would enhance the way it carries out its mission, compliance with state and federal laws, as well as a plan that would help them to deliver services in the best and most efficient manner possible. And so what we did is we put together an approach that we'd like to kind of share with you today and get your thoughts before we actually start kicking off a lot of the activities. So we're going to start first with introducing our project team, provide you the approach, and then talk a little bit about what's coming up in the weeks and months ahead. So let's start first with who we are. So our team is comprised of Sage Squirrel Consulting, and there are 3 partners that are part of our team, and we're joined by the University of Missouri, Kansas City Institute for Human Development. So if you go to the next slide. We basically, as a consulting firm, are a women's business enterprise. We have a lot of experience in the health and social service field, in particular in long-term service sports policy and operations. And a lot of our background is in strategic planning, assessing current state issues, stakeholder engagement, a lot of learning diffusion and program evaluation. And we have a broad spectrum of experiences that we kind of bring to the table with you all. And if you go to the next slide, please. I'm Erica, so I'm the person that's kind of leading the effort on the Sage Squirrel side. And prior to joining Sage Squirrel Consulting as a co-owner and a partner, I spent many years with the Lewin Group, which is a small boutique consulting firm, and I did a lot of work in particular with the Administration for Community Living, in particular administration on disabilities, did some work with DD councils, P&A, projects of national significance, developing performance measures, like a whole host of work in that arena. And then prior to joining Lewin, I worked for Ohio Medicaid for many years, and I had a combination of experience with Ohio Medicaid as well as with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. And I played a lot of different roles over the course of my career there, from a director, policy analyst, quality assurance, vocational specialist, and yes, I was a direct support professional. I started out my career all through college, supporting people in ICFDD facilities. And I am a mother of 4 children. So I have 2 children who are adopted, and one of my daughters, we adopted her at the age of 12, and she does have complex medical conditions and the learning challenges that come with having a complex medical condition. But she's definitely thriving. And Shelley's going to talk in a minute about charting the life course and the principles and tools there. And I'm happy to say I started using a lot of those principles and tools with my daughter many years ago. And I had to become the squeaky wheel that I never thought I would have to be, but I became that. And I use those tools to kind of help her to navigate. And in particular, right now, we're navigating that transition to adulthood, which is quite interesting. But I'm happy to say that she's part of the Project Search program. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but she's like learning that employment world and trying to figure out how she can be gainfully employed and really a part of her community. And so it's really exciting to see her thrive in that environment. And then I'm joined the Sage Squirrel team by 2 other people, Yvonne Powell, and she has a lot of experience in the Medicaid space. She also worked with me at the Lewin Group, and we did a lot of work together on state policy and practices. She comes with a lot of experience working with Medicaid 1115, long-term care transformation, rate setting, just a whole host of experiences that bridge programmatic and functional areas. And she's a mother of 2 daughters as well. And then I'm joined by Yonda Snyder, who is the co-founder of Sage Squirrel Consulting, and she has a long record as a change agent, human resource background, and she's the former director of the Division of Aging. So she comes with us with a lot of organizational transformation experience. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Shelley, and she'll introduce her team. Oh, you're on mute, Shelley. I think it's in the upper like column of the teams.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start showing again. Okay, good morning. I'm Shelley Reynolds, and I'm with the University of Missouri Kansas City Institute for Human Development. We've been around for many years as our University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, really focusing on research, training, community development, information sharing, specifically as it relates to those with all types of disabilities, but especially encompassing those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Through my work here, I am the director of the Life Course Nexus Training and Technical Assistance Center, which is really the strategic partner in this initiative. I come to this conversation not only as a professional with experience. I have my degree in occupational therapy, but I've worked at the university for over 25 years, really working to ensure the voice of the individual with a disability and their families are heard in both practice and policy change. I come to that not with a personal sort of passion in that I have a brother in his 40s that we adopted when I was a young child, and so have experienced really life living with a disability with a family member, as well as interacting with the long-term service system that provides his supports on a day-to-day basis. Also, part of that conversation is not only, Eric himself, but wrapped up in the conversation that my parents are starting to age. And so as the adult sibling, what is my long-term role going to be as I partner with our provider agencies and our state service systems? And so all of that personal experience that I continue to live day to day really drives the work that I do at the policy level. So I've had the opportunity to work for the last 12 years in partnership with the National Association for State Directors on Developmental Disability Services on policy work around the National Community Practice on Supporting Families. And through that work is the evolution of the strategic approach that we're going to share with you. The other work that really is underpinning to most of this is that I spent the first 12 years of working at IHD supporting the self-advocacy movement. And really, I always say, being in the trenches and learning side by side with advocates and self-advocates who were driving policy and community-wide change. And then spent another 10 years as the director of our Family to Family Health Information Center, where we receive thousands of calls from families, professionals, and individuals trying to navigate not only life, but the services that they need. She's not here today, but joining our team is Jenny Turner, who brings a wealth of experience. She was a support coordinator. She was a director of a provider agency, and she leads a lot of our organizational and systemic change initiatives. And so she'll be integral to this team. She too comes to this conversation as a sibling of a sister who is 30 years old and another sibling who is adopted. So she'll be a part of this conversation as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Erica, who's going to share our approach.
Great, thank you. So basically, we've done a lot of strategic planning work over the years, and we've learned that there are certain keys to success. And one of those keys to success is basically looking at strategic planning more as a system transformation and less as a compliance exercise. That really this is about creating a vision and a set of strategies that help people to live their best lives. And so we feel like one of the keys to success is to kind of make sure that all of the stakeholders, which are the people who receive supports in their services, as well as the stockholders, those that are kind of paid in one way or another to be around the table, that all of them understand why change is important and what it might or should look like. And so we would like to work with everyone to refine a vision by first listening to the people most impacted by the system and then bringing in the rest of the stockholders and stakeholders to kind of understand their voice, what role they play in that system, the different touch points, and the role they play in moving toward a solution that helps people to live their best lives. And of course, another key to success is the ability to be flexible, to be able to move with you wherever you might need to be at any point in time. And that flexibility might mean moving an activity around or adjusting how we might facilitate something or adjusting how we might implement the actual roadmap itself. And so we'll be flexible, and that project management will be really key to making sure that we stay on task with what you hope to accomplish through this effort. The next slide I wanted to kind of talk through is kind of our overall approach. And so when you think about strategic planning, think about it as a cycle of improvement, a cycle of change. And it's really all about helping people to live their best lives. And so strategy plays a really key role in that cycle because strategy impacts all facets of a person's life. So although a person might be receiving 2 or 3 services through DDSN programs, they're connected to lots of other resources beyond what DDSN provides. It could be community supports, it could be their own strengths and assets, it could be technology, but all these things come together in a strategic way to impact their whole lives, to help them to live their best lives. So the purpose of the strategy and of a strategic plan is really to help the system to be accurate, consistent, efficient, and support people to have autonomy, choice, and empowerment in their lives. And all of that together kind of leads to sustainable practices and policy. So embedded in our approach is the idea of charting the life course and the principles and the policy and practices and tools that are part of that model. And Shelley's going to spend a little bit of time in the next 10 to 15 minutes kind of unpacking that a little bit for you so that you'll understand kind of that thread, and then I'll kind of sum it all up at the very end. So Shelley, can you ready start to unpack it a little bit?
While she's coming up, could I ask a question, real quick question? Sure. By way of getting my brain around what we've just been hearing in this, are these two things enveloped some kind of way? Or are they different completely, or do they overlap, Doctor?
They're 2 distinct initiatives, but they're, of course, the work with identifying and piloting and hopefully implementing level of care assessments will be represented in an overall strategic plan, I assume, right? Because that's when she talks about all.
So when they show up in January 31st or into January, will they have overlapped any kind of way with what is being done here? No, there's no overlapping at all? Can they speak? Yeah, it just seems like, I mean, it's strategic and assessment of a metric assessment that there, is it not overlapping at all?
Well, I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, they're related, but I don't think that there's if by overlapping, if your
I don't
question
mean
is it
redundant.
duplicitous? No.
I don't mean redundant. I mean that they can integrate in some kind of way what they're doing. And
Yes. And we need to make sure, the team, executive team, to make sure that as we make progress through the work with Edmetric, that we're continually getting that information.
because their strategy may involve a metric of some kind, that is my question, I suppose. Or are they maybe they're two different worlds and I'm
What they're doing is a portion of this the strategic plan is gonna be
Larger.
this big. And the assessment part of it is this big of it. Does that make sense? And it's the assessment part of it is a portion of, but the strategic planning is gonna deal with everything that we do.
They're not at odds then with each other.
No. There'll be kind of, that will be a portion of this, but theirs will be detailed. This will be broader. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just,
Go
My
ahead.
assessment is Henry Ford made a V8 engine. That's the engine over there. And getting into the science, how does this actually work? That's my assessment, based upon what I'm looking at. So that's that engine.
All right.
Yeah, but y'all need to realize,
And this is impacting the way people live, learn, work, and play. Am I correct?
Go ahead, Dr.
In my mind, the way that I think of how they interact without being redundant is strategic planning, again, I assume, will have as an initiative and a priority, the utilization. But the Edmetric work will speak to that with specificity, and make recommendations about how, like the implementations, the process, the procedures, and which assessments ought to be utilized. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I'm kind of an old philosophy major, but I always, when I would sort of find myself wandering in a morass of some kind, I would always say, give me an example. I'd always clear things up a little bit. And maybe that's sort of what I'm looking for. I don't mean to hold us up because they're in the middle of their discussion. I just wanted to make sure that while one process was going on, it did not some sort of way miss what they were doing or like strangers in the night, they just sort of pass each other. But it sure would have been good had they been talking, because maybe something could have oh, well, my goodness. Well, that answers what we were trying to say over here while we were doing the acuity thing. Or it might be both of them would say, poor David Thomas, you know, he just doesn't get, you know, the distinction. That's fine too. I mean, I can live with anything. I just was sort of trying to bring it out in the open, because it seems to me like, you know, they at least need to have each other's phone number so they can kind of discuss in case there's an overlap. That would be helpful to both of them. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
Well,
let's go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah.
Jen.
So I threw a slide up. I had it later on in there, but I threw this up as a visual. I'm a visual person. So, you know, as Edmetrics was talking, it absolutely is connected together. Because as you start strategically looking at how to move your system into a person-centered approach, you can't ignore each of the touch points that happens. So we'll strategically be having conversations at each of those touch points. And so, you know, I was taking notes about what they were doing, because as they're getting, gathering information from staff and providers, those are the same types of things where the conversation will overlap. And as they're developing instruments or implementation, there's the sort of strategically and conceptually what's the goals that it's working towards. So I'm sure Erica probably agrees, but I was definitely saying, oh, we need to connect it not only to that initiative you have going on, but there's probably lots of other initiatives that we'll see how we can build on as we have this process. Erica, did you want to respond before I got started to that?
I totally agree. No, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to slide back to the other. So just to give you a little bit of background to the Charting the Life Course framework, I always like to use this slide to begin this off because about 12 years ago, we were having a conversation amongst ourselves as researchers and systems change agents with stakeholders from all over the state. And I think in terms of colors and images and pictures, like that's how I actualize some of the things. And for me, where we are having conversations or will be having conversations with you and other stakeholders in your state is really about thinking about how services are delivered. And if you think about the way our service systems have evolved over time, whether it's education, whether it's disability specific services, we constantly talk about specializing those services and wrapping that individual around those services. But what we're starting to recognize is that sometimes the way the services are delivered themselves are exactly the barrier to people having access to employment, friendships, living in the community, and the roles that they have. So we're faced with many different, I would say pressure points as a state service system, right? We have funding realities, we have direct support professional crisis going on. We probably have sort of islands of gaps of providers in your state. But we also have generations of individuals with disabilities and families that want services differently than we've always provided them. So all of this is sort of crashing together in the way of, as we think about strategically helping you guys come up with some of your goals and your initiatives. So the vision on the right-hand side is really about how do we think about integrated supports, not just only what's eligible through your systems, but how are we thinking about building the capacity to leverage technology? So it's awesome to hear you guys talk about the technology summit coming up. How are we talking about leveraging the resources in your community that all your community members have access to? How are we thinking about the individuals themselves and their strengths and their abilities? And so that's the vision on the right when we start thinking about the Life Course framework. We started to think about this because we were charged by the Administration for Community Living to bring state service systems together and really talk about what are some transitional changes that can occur, but fundamentally, what are some of the transformational changes that needed to happen? If we keep thinking the same about people with disabilities and the service system, we're never, ever evolving to really meet their needs. And so what has happened and occurred from this over the last 12 years is there's 22 states that are part of this national community of practice that leverages the Charting the Life Course framework to really think strategically about their policy and practice change. And what is really unique and interesting about it is that the framework itself was started and driven and created by people with disabilities and their families to actually use in their everyday own lives. It wasn't necessarily designed for sort of strategic engagement or systems, strategy planning. But what's occurred over the last 12 years is we've taken those concepts and utilized them as a strategic planning framework. And the beauty of that is we often know that we talk systems speak sometimes when we talk to one another, and that's not the everyday way to engage with our stakeholders. It's not the way that they talk about their lives and their needs. And so what's nice about the framework is it continues to ground us in the language and the view that really keeps us front and center about people's lives as we're doing hard conversations and talking about the infrastructure of the system. At the heart of this framework is the core belief that all people have the right to live, love, work, and play in their community. And I think what's really important about this slide and the framework is that we really see it as a civil rights conversation. It's not just a social service conversation for people, it's really a civil rights conversation. And so how are we really helping people with disabilities, without disabilities, family members, really achieve the life that they want? So a while ago, when all of this started to evolve, it started out as a guiding framework. And the guiding principles of this framework are what we use to actually have our strategic conversations with stakeholders. But again, those are the exact same principles I can use when I sit down with an individual with a disability and discuss what they want for their good life. We also have a set of tools that we use at the person level and at the strategic level that are very visual, that really kind of, I always say, change the conversation, that change the question to really get at sort of creative responses that really identify the needs of individuals. And then not part of this project, but what's starting to happen all over the country is you're seeing people start utilizing this for person-centered planning, for special education, for IEP planning. They're using it in the foster care system, the behavioral health system. And so it's not a disability-specific framework. And that's what's been really incredible to see. We are all driven by a whole bunch of models, theories, and framework. And so this framework itself brings together the concepts around family-centered practices, public health model, the life course theory, self-determination. And so it takes all of that and kind of compiles it in a way that becomes practical and easy for people to understand. So at a really, really high level, I'm going to go over what some of the key principles are when we think about this. We always think about the person and really, really try to understand that person within the context of their family and their community. So we can't just think about them in isolation. We need to understand the relationships around them, the culture they come from, the language they speak, what is important to them and for them. We do this by really thinking about quality of life domains that we call life domains. And we're thinking about them individually. So whether you're thinking about an assessment or you're thinking about the supports a person needs, we have to be thinking about each one of those domains individually, but we can't forget the fact that they're very interconnected. And so these icons and these domains actually, I always say, become a way that we can do needs assessments, that we can crosswalk data, and we can help people understand in the core areas of their life what is going on and what are different supports that would match some of those needs. We also talk about, oftentimes we think about our service delivery array, and that very much is about the goods and services that we provide. But when we're thinking about the individual and their family, we really, really want to stress that it's not always the delivery of service. It could be what information supports do they need? What navigational supports do they need? Do they have peer supports? Do they have meaningful relationships in their life? Do they have the social emotional needs met so that they could achieve the day-to-day life that they want? In addition to those really important goods and services like, their disability services, technology, respite, and the additional supports they might need for their physical and day-to-day life. The other component that the framework really starts to help strategically problem solve around is what we call our integrated support star. And that should be familiar to you from the slide from before. And what we do is when we are doing strategic planning, we're very intentional about mapping out the resources at an individual level or even at a state and policy level to really understand not only what the government can provide in terms of eligibility specific supports, but what are the resources within that community? How are we leveraging employers? How are we thinking about the faith-based organizations? How are we thinking about the different types of technology supports as we think about this? And so the 5 points of the STAR become a reminder to us to constantly be diversifying our solutions as we look towards things. The other thing about the framework is that it's about moving a trajectory towards someone where someone wants to go, really understanding and honoring where a system or a person has been, but really thinking about where do they want to go? What's the Northern Star that you guys strategically want to achieve? But at the same time, what are the specific outcomes and initiatives and goals you need to work on right now? And we talk about that the lifespan are the stepping stones, right? So maybe someone's not in your system yet, but what is it that they might need, or why aren't they entering your system? Or, what's the stepping stone to things happening in early childhood that are going to make an impact on that person's life? But from a systems perspective, how's it going to make an impact on what they might want from your system, or even the long-term cost of their wants and their needs? So we utilize this framework to really, we can use it at every level. I can sit down with a family and use it for futures planning. I can sit down with an individual and use it for personal goal setting, but I can use it with an organization to do strategic planning, or we can work with a state service system to really dig into the components and work with your stakeholders to really bring out what is important to them. So that is a really high level overview of the framework. When we start really thinking strategically about it, what we're really thinking about are strategically, where do you want to go? What's the vision you have for your system? What's the culture within your organization, the policies and the practice that are going to lead you to where you want to go strategically? Every single thing that we do, though, engages stakeholders at every level. So that's what you're going to really get from this process, is really listening and building trust with you guys, your staff, your stakeholders, your providers, but really listening to the individuals with disabilities and their families, especially as you have different target audiences within your department, and really understanding some of the nuances of them, of what their needs are and what their current sort of vision is for what would support their good life. So we do that a number of different ways. I'm not going to take a ton of time to go over this. We've worked in Oklahoma. They had a wait list. So we used the framework and the principles to really dig into what does your wait list look like? Who's currently on your wait list? Who's out there that's not known that's going to eventually come into your wait list? And we started to use the framework to really dig into where do they live? How old are they? What are some of the demographics that would help us understand this population better, so that we are building a strategic plan, not only for people that are in our systems, but for people that are going to need the systems. So here's just an example of how we then, broke it down by age. So we're constantly creating visuals for you to respond to strategically and kind of have your own aha moments, I would say, of what is it that's going to drive your work. We'll be working strategically with each stakeholders group to develop a vision, a trajectory towards what they want, really building on the things that worked well and the things that didn't work well. We always consider not only the individual outcome domains, but what's going on with the social determinants of health. And we cannot ignore that when we think about our strategic planning. So in the state of Missouri, we've done a lot of work with their quality assurance team as they're looking at that from the back end. We do a lot of work on the front end of how to build this into the person-centered planning process. And so those are some of the strategies that we do. We also recognize that you're one of many systems that people's lives interact with. So how does that either support or leverage or become a barrier to the strategy and the strategic direction that you guys are going? So the framework is being used across many different systems. And so this just kind of gives you an idea about how are we trying to really align people towards your vision of people having a good life. So that's a very down and dirty overview of the sort of the values and the principles that are driving the strategy. But I was going to pass it over to Erica, who's going to get more into the nuts and bolts of what this will actually look like.
Thank you, Shelley. So you'll notice along the top there, the charting the life course tools principles that we're going to be embedding and threading through everything. The activities we're going to do are really going to take us through where we are now to where we want to go. And so we're going to do that by really understanding the current state of your system, by talking to people, key people in the system, through a survey, through bringing together people who receive supports into an advisory group, to having a planning session with DDSN and staff, as well as early next year, kind of having regional workshops around your state and talking to each of your regional centers one-to-one so that we can understand kind of what role do they play in this larger system of supports for people. And then we'll draft a plan, and that plan will include like the placemat version, really high level and easy to understand, as well as a lot of detail. And we'll put that out there for public input and do some feedback sessions around the state. And from there, we'll develop a roadmap for how do we implement this plan? How do we make this plan actionable, real, a living document, and not just something you put on a shelf and say, great, we developed a plan 5 years ago. It's actually a plan for action for how you move forward day to day, month to month, year to year. And so this gives you just kind of a scope of what to expect in the months ahead, broken out here. And I think right now what we'd like to do is just kind of open it up to questions, because I know we threw a lot at you. So we want to make sure that that we answer anything you might have, or that we make adjustments if you feel like adjustments are needed. So I'll kind of pause there, see what the room has questions about.
Okay, if I'm on staff, I'm thinking to myself, excuse me, staff, because y'all probably don't think this at all. If I'm on staff, I'm thinking, geez, which group is on the phone to me now? Is it Metricum? No, this is Sage Squirrel. Okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Let me look at how am I going to do my work that I'm supposed to be doing and handling all this? This is great stuff that we're hearing. How's the staff going to do that, Doctor? I mean, how are they going to be able to manage what they're doing with all these wonderful ideas and the implementation, aside from the assessment part, the implementation of it? How do you have that mapped out for them?
As you heard Sage Squirrel just say, part of that after you draft the roadmap is to figure out your implementation plan and whatever staff impact that will have. But at this point, we're confident both of these initiatives Harley's been tremendously helpful for, and we believe that we're able to, with our.
We're not overwhelming staff with
We're
the
not
two.
overwhelming them any more than they are already.
I think long-term, I mean, we've been talking about strategic planning, and I think that's part of the problem is there's been no strategic plan. It's been put out a fire here, put out a fire here, do this project, do that project, instead of having a roadmap. And I think if the staff had a roadmap ahead of them, while it might be a little bit more right at that time, down the road, it sure makes life a lot easier, because they don't just get fires thrown at them randomly. They have a set course that where they're going, not veer off here and go to Lexington and veer off here and go to Sumter. They're all going down I-20, or they're all going down I-95. They're not veering off on side roads. And I think that's been part of the problem at DDSN, is that they just were randomly doing things. And so with the strategic plan, it kind of brings us all to the table, and we decide, okay, these are our priorities. And these are the things we've really got to prioritize, and we got to put them in some kind of order. And from the way I understand, this group will actually be doing most of the work. We'll provide them some stuff, but it won't be our people actually doing the work. These folks will do the work. And then they'll bring it back to us and say, okay, how do you like this? And we'll feed each other back and forth until we get something we really like. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the load's not going to become so great that we run into, because we did run into that at one time.
Yeah.
I mean, that complaint came back, as I recall, from staff, that they were being, and we sort of had to pull back from some of the things we were going to do.
That's right.
Because it was just too much of a load to do one thing and then take care of their own jobs.
That's part of the issue, is that we had so many different priorities than the staff. At this point, we're going to put all the priorities together and figure out what the real priorities are. Does that make sense? So we'll be giving input, the staff will be giving input, The consumers will be giving input, the families will be giving input, and then we will come up with a list of what the real priorities are.
Well, as long as, I mean, my only suggestion as we pursue these two things here, I'm so glad you got them together so that we can sort of, compare and contrast and kind of figure out as a commission, since we're, part-time, I guess you could call us. But I would hope that staff's going to be open enough to you, and I think there's been a lot of good communication ability that if they're overloaded, they're going to be able to say, because the two groups can modify dates. And if there's the necessity to pull back a little bit to give them some breathing room, that's all I'm concerned about right now with this. I don't have any problem with what they're doing or any of that. In fact, I'm very, very impressed with what they presented here today. But I'm also worried about who we got in place doing the job that keeps the whole operation going. And I don't want them tripped up with a load that they go home with. So, gosh, you're not going to believe what I got to do now. And so as long as there can be communication so that you can react to that, to keep the wheels on the road while all this consideration is ongoing. But I, surely you have taken that into consideration as we have gone down the road here on this.
How is the staff feeling about this? Are they okay with the idea of strategic planning as a whole? Have y'all had that conversation in executive session now?
Well, as an executive, we're all really excited that finally we got through the very slow RFP process. We're very confident with both groups that we've identified to serve as our consultants. And I think that what you were saying deserves additional emphasis, which is the reason we contracted with consulting groups is they're really doing the bulk of the work. We have touch base meetings with them bi-weekly or weekly, depending on which one we're talking about, in order to make sure that we're aligned and provide technical input, just have a dialogue in terms of the concern for the bandwidth, for lack of a better term, of our staff. I have bi-weekly meetings with the executive staff. Also, I keep an open door. We communicate regularly. We have a weekly meeting. We have other touch points. And a piece of that is always talking about how are they doing on capacity, how their team is on capacity. And to the extent we have to adjust, we make adjustments. And we've brought some of those adjustments to you all as a commission of when we have to add FTEs, when we need to reorg. But right now, I think that the timelines work nicely together, and having these move together in this current moment, given all of the other systems change, I don't think there could be a better time to have both of these initiatives kick off.
If you're happy, I'm happy. Here's my cell phone number, 864-630-9389. I've said it a half dozen times in there. I'm repeating it now because I'd sure hate, after all we've gone through this past year and then with COVID and everything else, and hopefully trying to smooth out, if suddenly there is such a blizzard of things that we're start having problems with the basics out in the field. And I'm sure the director is going to have a handle on that one. But that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. All right, any other questions for these wonderful folks? Squirrel. I'm surprised one of y'all haven't asked where their name came from, because that was the question last week. That was the question at our last
Get that one a lot.
Well, it was actually Dr. Cora's question that was with.
That's right, that's right. So tell us about your name and where Squirrel Consulting comes from.
Say squirrel.
Sage Squirrel, yes. Sage, because we like to bring our experience to the table, and we'd like to think we're wise, but you know, we may not be. But we try to bring our experience to the table. And then the squirrels, because we really like to solve problems. And if you notice, squirrels are always trying to find a place to bury the nut. And they're fun and they're creative. And so we see the squirrels as that's kind of who we are as people. And so we bring that to bear along with our experience in order to help. The consulting part would be to help people to change the way they do things, to help impact people's lives. That's really our mission.
Okay,
So that's what it's about.
there you go.
So, one comment that I have about all this, is, it sounds like, that you're intentionally going to gather input from the public and the community, and the stakeholders to influence what we do as an agency to deliver the best services possible. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think, and if that, since that is the case, I think that that's a very positive thing. It's nice to know that, that's going to be part of, you know, the underpinning for what we actually do going forward in many ways. So, I just wanted to clarify that that's how I was hearing everything and digesting it. And, so thank you for your presentation.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Miller.
I just add my little 2 cents
Sure, please.
or half a cent.
Either one.
Because of the professional personnel that Dr. Fry have around her, I wrote down, I see the vision, and I'm very, very comfortable with the approach. So I give back the balance of my time.
It's I feel very confident in Dr. Fry's leadership with this. And like I said, she and I have been working on getting Sage or someone on board to do the strategic planning for over a year now. This has been in the works since she came here last October. So I'm thankful that we finally reached this point to get started. And we look forward to meeting with you all again in January, I believe it is. We're going to have a work session with you all, so as a commission. So any other questions?
The only question I'd have is, the only comment I'd have is that these two things are really, they're separate in the sense that the liquidity assessment tool is something we've been needing. Some people have been going after for years around here in a very, very slight way, but nobody's ever taken the bull by the horns and actually done it in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, which they've been talking about for at least that long. But the strategic plan is really something that Dr. Fry brought along to make it a much bigger overall picture. But I was just going to ask, are y'all going to be here whenever you do our, in person, whenever you do our training of, whenever you do our assessment of, with the commission and all that sort of thing?
Yes, our plan is to come in January and meet with all of you. We're really looking forward to that. I'm kind of unpacking the vision.
And y'all are in Kansas, y'all are in Missouri?
I'm in Ohio, Shelley's in Missouri. We come from different places.
When you talk about, we bring this part of what we're talking about from, what state do y'all bring it from? Ohio or Missouri?
The framework is all over the nation. We're actually using it all over the world. We're using it in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We're probably using it in 35 different states. So it's not a state specific thing. I always tell people it's a human centric thing. So it really has nothing to do with the state agency. It has to do with making sure it's meeting the needs of people and asking you state specific questions that are specific to your state as the response.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Other questions? Thank you all for being with us today, and we do look forward to seeing you again in January.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Enjoy your holidays.
And happy holidays to you as well. Okay, so we're going to move on now to community committee business. Commissioner Blackwood, would you head up finance and audit this morning?
Yes. Sure.
Tab 5 and 6 in your books.
Yeah. So the finance and Audit Committee met on November the 9th, and there are two items that I'm bringing to the full commission for a vote today. The first item is the, something we're called cooperative grants. The agency brought to the committee a request to increase a threshold of cooperative grants that are kind of around training from $400,000, which was what we approved in the 23 spending plan. And they've asked that we increase that to $1 million. This is really the ceiling for the co-op programming that they're putting together that will, it's detailed a little bit in your packet. The provider grants is what they're calling it, for shared cooperative services for training and our staffing. As you know, staffing and training is a very important element to supporting providers and the level of care that they give to the consumers. And this is somewhat of a new program that's being developed from scratch with the help of the team here at DDSN and looking at what some other states are doing to try to develop this this cooperative sharing of training and programming between providers, because different providers are different sizes and they all have different needs in terms of what they need for staffing, training, and support. And so we were told that in looking at into developing this program further, that it was going to be more expensive than originally thought and provided in our fiscal year 23 spending plan. And so it's really an increase from what we already approved. Again, the grants will be to the providers. It's the program's being developed right now. And I don't know if Quincy has any additional information. I'm trying to summarize everything that we've talked
I think
about.
you summarized it well. The only thing I would add is that we were wanting this to be like a multi-year grant as well.
Right, yeah, that's the other.
As part of that, but other than that, I think you
Right.
summarized it.
Right. So the multi-year grant, I know so many of these details are still being worked out in terms of exactly how everything's going to be rolled out, but is the concept with the multi-year request that a provider that applies for the grant to get the training in their facility or whatever for their employees, is it to make it available to them for more than a year? Is that where the multi-year is coming in? Because I don't know that was completely clarified in the Finance and Audit Committee, and I just want to make sure I understand.
So a lot of the times when you do pilot programs, it takes a while to get them off the ground, and you're trying to get separate entities to kind of figure out a plan. And when you collaborate like that, it takes even longer. So we wanted to be able to make this grant a multi-year grant. So it wouldn't expire at the end of a fiscal year and then have to return it and we have to redo a grant. Or it just makes it, I guess, cleaner or easier to execute. Exactly, if you make it a multi-year.
Madam Chairman, I do have a question for
Okay.
you there. I know when we initially talked about doing these grants, and we had talked about using FMAP funds to help fund these. And that was one of the things that we listed in that next phase of FMAP money that
Yeah.
we're supposed to get. What is the status there? Will those funds be able to be used for this? Or what is?
So, we spent some time talking about the 10% FMAP.
Mm-hmm.
Before we knew that we would not be controlling that money, when we switched to fee for service and DHHS took more authority over more of the handling of the money, that we really didn't have access to that 10%, because we were given a chance or an opportunity to say, how would we spend that money when we get it? And that's what you're referring
Yeah.
to. I think it was part of that like wish list of a plan of ways we could spend it. But so it's not really relevant now because at least to the 10% FMAP, but certainly I believe it would be paid for the first FMAP, which we got, which was 6.2%, I believe,
Okay.
which has put our budget at what it is right now, which
Sure.
gives us money to do things like this
Sure.
and spend money like that.
Do you
So
think
it's
that
kind of related to
the
FMAP.
continuation of this, and in the continuation of this, I don't mind us funding it, for this first year or whatever at $1 million. Is there a way to approach HHS about this being a continued program where they would give some of that FMAP money that we talked about to cover this program?
So the ARP funds is what we're talking about with the 10%. They submitted to CMS a spending plan, and CMS had to approve that spending plan. And so there were some items from DDSN that they incorporated into the overall spending plan that was submitted to CMS. So, and forgive me, I can't remember exactly the things that were approved by CMS, but we could always go and look at that to see if some of the training dollars were approved or not.
So that would be something I think we should look at and see if, if we can take advantage of that opportunity to be able to use some of that money, because some of this training was caused by COVID. I mean, some of the needs for this training were caused by COVID. That these smaller agencies are struggling because COVID shut down their day programs or whatever. So those are things I think we need to look at, having that discussion with HHS regarding the funding and saying, okay, look, you used our information to get this $10 million, 10% FMAP. How about let's use some of it and put it back into the programs that you used to get access to that. So if we could look into that at some point, I think that would be a great thing.
I'll try to pull their spending plan and what.
That would be great. Thank you, Quincy. Appreciate that. I mean, in no hurry. That's just something I was going through my mind that, we were still sitting out there.
It's a good comment. Sure.
I want to make sure we take advantage and use whatever of that actually supposed to come to DDSN, that we take advantage of that and use it. So get it to those consumers as much as we can.
All right, so if anyone doesn't have any other questions, of course, for Quincy, does anyone have any questions?
Well, we
on
do
this?
need
Because
a motion. It's a motion and a second at a committee.
Yes, so we'll have to vote on it.
Yes, so we will need a vote, but is there any discussion further?
These contracts already at the $400,000 level, we're just raising them to about $1 million, or we're going out for bids for other new projects?
We haven't put the grant application out, so in the process of designing the criteria for the grant application that would say you can ask for up to this much, your grant proposal has to include these topics. We realize that if we're going to have multiple grantees and we anticipate that they would want funding for more than 1 year, and these are like startup needs for these cooperative models, the $400,000 was insufficient. And so that's why we came and asked to increase the ceiling to enable what we would anticipate will be multiple applicants that have multiple participants, right? Because any grant application for this will have to include multiple provider participants, because that's the purpose, is to have this cooperative model. And so our hope is if you agree to increase the ceiling, we hope to get the grant application out in January of 23.
Yeah, none of the money has been assigned to any one thing yet. It's just, kind of a range of what we think it might be. Just
How many of these grants do we anticipate being requested? Do we have any idea of how many would be asked for?
We don't know how many folks will apply. I have heard from a couple of people that they think this will fill important gaps in the system. Again, this concept being on the staffing side, you might be a very small provider and having a full-time accountant really might not be the best budget option, but perhaps a group of 3 to 5 providers could have a cooperative model where you all pitch in and you get 20% of that person's time or something. Same thing with other kinds of professional staffing. And then again, the training piece on identifying what kinds of training in your region or at the local level you really need, and to be able to have dollars for that and have, you know, it flow through this cooperative entity that participants can all.
Okay.
So we don't have, until we put it out, we don't know how many, but we would anticipate that we will have several applicants, and that's what we would like to see happen.
Okay.
And especially to have some regional diversity.
Good. All right. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, and that motion is carried.
All right, so the last item that I have is under tab 6, which is the directive that you guys have seen. We talked about it in the last 2 Finance and Audit Committee meetings, and I think we might have mentioned it as a full commission. But anyway, this is just a directive regarding the general duties of the DDSN internal audit. It was put out for public input, and only one comment was made on one of the pages. I think I have it. Regarding this directive, was made by a provider, and it's on which I believe is under, let's see, actually page 2, and it's the internal internal auditor is authorized to, under that section, that first bullet point was changed to reflect the comment that we received by a provider, and it originally read, have full, free, and unrestricted access to all functions, records, property, and personnel pertinent to carrying out any DDSN board or contracted service provider, which was striked out of the final, which doesn't have DDSN board or contracted provider engagement. And of course, it continues on, subject to accountability and confidentiality and safeguards. And anyway, that little portion was removed regarding the DDSN board or contracted service provider from this directive, and that was the only change that was made based on public input. So we reviewed the directive, and we voted on it to come out to full commission for final approval.
Okay, this does not need to go back to policy, correct?
No, it doesn't. No.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion and a second coming out of committee on policy number 27505DD. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, and that policy is approved.
That's all I have for my report. We don't have a planned December Finance and Audit Committee meeting, so.
Okay, very good. All right, tab 7, we're going to go on now to policy. Commissioner Barry Malthus.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm obviously the chairman of the policy committee, and our report today is the administrative agency standards. Is the agency standards serve as the foundation for DDSN sponsored services and reports, and those standards are set forth through this document. And the standards were reviewed by the policy committee and posted on the website for 10 days for review. And there were several comments that we had, and we instituted some of those, and we also instituted a couple of more clarifications from the policy committee itself. And so this policy is ready to be, being brought today as a motion and second out of the Finance Committee to be approved by commission, which will begin on January 1st. And again, we're presenting it right now for the committee, to the commission for approval.
Okay, any questions or concerns regarding the policy, as it is a motion and a second out of committee?
So the last time, yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
The last time that this was updated was in 2017. Is that how I'm reading the?
Yeah, we actually incorporated a couple of different policies into this, and made some obsolete, which we love, which our policy committee loves to do, so that we don't have so many policies. And, so I'm actually surprised it wasn't brought to us before 2017, but when I make those kind of comments, some people, it'll be blank faces, but I don't really understand how a policy this expansive could be not updated in that long, but a lot of little things about policies I don't understand around here, or didn't understand until now, so I'm glad to be able to fix it now.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of this motion, this policy being approved, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, that is approved. Thanks, committee update.
The next item on the agenda is committee updates, which Ms. Lori normally does for us. I assume she would like to do that today as we normally do, so I'll turn it over to her to do our committee updates.
Sure. So we had 5 other policies by policy committee at this month's meeting. The first 3 kind of go together. They're all around telephone usage as well as the telephone, like mobile telephone usage, as well as landline. So 36708 DD, there was a recommendation to make it obsolete. 36711 DD, what we did was take that policy and add the information from 08 to it. And then 36720, which governs mobile devices. All 3 of those have been posted for public comment. The public comment period expires November the 28th. So we expect to bring them in January at the next meeting for policy committee approval and commission approval. The other 2 policies, one is 10401 DD, which is certification and licensure. The other is a major shift in the quality management policy, which is 128 DD. Again, both of those were approved by the policy committee with changes at the meeting. They were sent out for public comment. That public comment period expires 11/28. We'll bring them back to policy committee in January, and subsequently they'll come to the commission for approval.
Good work, Lori. All right, does that conclude everything, Commissioner Malcolm?
Yeah, that concludes the report for the policy committee, except to say that we, like the finance committee, are not planning to meet in December as of now, although things change around here on a regular basis. So we'll just have to see how that goes, but we don't think there'll be a policy committee meeting until January, which is usually, of course, the second Tuesday in January, and usually at 3 o'clock. So we will assume that'll be the case unless something changes that.
All right.
So you will not hear from me again until then, it looks like.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to move on to old business. Ann Dalton is going to give us our quarterly incident report. And Ann, as you come up, I just want to thank you for the work you did on behalf of this commission with regards to the emergency meeting we had to have the other day. I know that was not an easy job, and I've heard nothing but people singing your praises. We've had providers call us and tell us how good they thought you did, and how much they appreciate the work you do. And we as a commission want you to know that we appreciate it, and we know how difficult it is. And we appreciate your time and service with DDSN and appreciate what you did.
Thank you very much for that feedback. In your packets, you have the quarterly incident management summary that we'll discuss today. There are 2 pages there. One is specifically for our community-based programs. The other that's mostly highlighted in green is for our regional center program. Within this data for the community settings, through the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 23, there have been 131 individual abuse, neglect, or exploitation allegations spread among 97 distinct reports. On an annualized basis, the number of allegations are what we would expect for this time of year. So when we look at this year over year, or even month over month, it's where we would expect them to be. Thus far, there has been 1 arrest in community-based settings, and 25 standard of care findings have been verified. For critical incidents, there have been 305 critical incidents reported, and this number is a little higher than what we typically see in the first quarter, but often things tend to level out as we move through the year. For deaths, we have 25 deaths that have been reported in the first quarter, and this number is also consistent with prior year reporting. For regional centers, there have been 45 allegations of abuse, neglect, or exploitation across the 5 different settings. For the first quarter, there has been 1 arrest and 12 verified standard of care findings in those settings. There have been 38 critical incidents, which is also trending a little higher. But as a reminder, for the last quarter, we had 61 critical incidents. So as I mentioned before, things do tend to level out over time. And within our regional center settings, there have been 6 deaths that have been reported. Any questions?
Define critical for me.
A critical incident is a sentinel or noteworthy event that does not rise to the level of an allegation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, but there is some significant injury or impact to a person receiving services. It could be a fall that results in injury. It could be a choking incident. It could be an allegation of aggression or an altercation between 2 individuals. Okay.
Thank you, Ann. Good job, Ann. All right, Liz Lemon. You're up. Human Resources updates.
Good afternoon. I've provided information regarding our DSP hiring reports. So I reported the report for October 2021 to how we compare in October 2022. The average of days to process hires has decreased by 25% in process time. In total separations for October 21 was 40 employees, while October 22 was 31 employees. October 21, the agency had a net decrease of 197 DSPs, while in October 22, the agency reached a net change of 0 DSPs. So this indicates that the agency is able to recruit and retain DSPs for our staff at an equal rate than we were losing them last year. So we are kind of making equal ground at this point, which is good. So you see most recent DSP hiring data includes the following month for November. Coastal Regional Center has 18 DSP hires. Midland Center has 2 DSP hires and 3 RNs, which is pretty good. PD Salibi has 8 DSPs and Witten has 21 DSPs, 1 RN and 2 LPNs. So we're looking pretty good at this point. We've been able to recruit and retain DSP staff for 22 at a higher rate as compared to 21. So overall, our recruit and retention efforts have increased and has enabled us to kind of hold steady for the year. So we hope to see for it to improve for the year to come. So it's just a matter of time to kind of sit back and watch as we improve our efforts. We also implemented the direct support personnel professional career path program on July 2nd, and this has been going pretty well for retention. We've been receiving a lot of positive feedback. I think the media also came out as well, and we had staff speak on behalf of that, so that went really well. So we've been working really hard at looking at classifications across the board for equity and pay. We looked at the DSP program. That was quite a challenge in itself because it was kind of all over the place as far as the planning documents and pay. So we streamlined that process and those classifications to recreational specialists 2 and 3s and workforce specialists 1 and 2s. So that was quite a feat. In addition, we increased compensation for them as well. As I mentioned, we completed a compensation review for all classifications this year to include consumer supports, which included the AOD office. We kind of softened up the title for that to consumer supports and increased their hiring rates and our current rates for our staff, as well as longevity for state service. And we have received a lot of positive feedback with regards to that and retention and recruitment in that area. We also looked at housekeeping, food service, and also LPNs, and recently the maintenance staff. So across the board, we've been looking at the agency as a whole, and we're quite proud that we've kind of reached this far at this point in time for the year. So it's been quite a feat. So we hope that these initiatives will help recruit and retain staff. And as we go into year 23, we'll see more and more improvement.
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
Regarding the chart, the vacant DSPs under October 2022 and same thing under October 2021. So total, we still have 506 vacancies for this year, correct? Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
And then versus last year, we had 510 vacancies.
Correct. Yeah, so we're still breaking even at this point, which is not a bad thing. Thank God we're not in the deficit. So between hiring and retention, I think we're improving and just kind of holding steady at this point, which I think compared to other maybe state agencies and industry-wide that we are trying to compete through compensation and retention the best that we can.
Processing time has decreased 25%, I think. Means it went from 4 days to 3 or 4 weeks to 3 weeks.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Processing time decreased by 25%. That can go from 4 days to 3 days or 4 weeks to 3 weeks.
Right.
So
Which one was it?
which one was it?
So the processing time, let me see, I realize,
Average
so you have
days.
the average total, these are days, so average days between referral and hiring package, it was 10.8 days, and not this year, or last year, it was 11.8 days.
I'm sorry, is that on there somewhere? I missed it?
No, she
Oh,
just sent it
okay.
to us.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the chart, yeah, so these are days.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right, so we ensure, we try to ensure that we are reviewing applications in a timely manner in HR and submitting those to the hiring managers, and then they're conducting interviews, and then we're trying to get the applicants or the candidates in the door as quickly as possible. A lot is involved with that, from FBI checks, SLED checks, PBDs, drug testing and everything. So over the last couple of years, HR staff, we have advanced our schedules to work with management to ensure that we are trying to expedite the hiring process.
I only have one quick question. Can you give us any status update on the video? We had talked about, the communications committee primarily have been talking about having a video for social media to encourage people to work for our agency about 1.5 years ago or so. And mentioned it last time you gave us a report about 3 months ago or so in Spartanburg. And I just wondered if there was any update on us having a video for social media to go out to encourage people to work for us.
Here, I can speak to that. We are currently, if you recall from that communications committee meeting that we had in June-ish, we are in the process of hiring a person who would lead that effort. So
Oh, that's not PJ to do that, is it?
no,
Yeah.
it's a different person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay, yeah,
I think we end up reposting, but now we have, we might have narrowed, I'm looking at Harley because that's.
It had to get reposted.
Okay,
So we have to.
yes, it is reposted, and so we'll hopefully, get interviews done before the holidays so that we can have somebody start 1st of next year. But I can make sure, I can speak with PJ and make sure he talks with HR staff to just sort of start plotting, the kinds of things we want to highlight, so that we'll have a framework in place. So when the person starts, they can hit the ground running with that project.
Any other questions for Ms. Liz?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I mean, I try to give as much information as possible since I'm only, I'm presenting quarterly, so we have a lot going on. Central office postings, we completed 62 hires. We had 23 new hires that were not from another state agency. We hired 6 temporary staff, 17 full-time. Out of the new 23 new hires, we had 10 new hires that were actually movement from other state agencies. So we are lucky enough to pull staff from other state agencies. We had 16 rehired temps and 13 internal hires into new positions. So we are recruiting heavily, both out in the regions and in central office. We've had a lot of changes and good things happening.
Can you tell me where we are? There's a position that was posted. It was like public information officer or something like that. I think it's Starling. Where are we in that process? Have we?
I've reviewed the applications and I have staff helping me coordinate with the applicants to schedule interviews hopefully for later this month and early December.
Great, good to hear that. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Recruitment and retention initiatives, I kind of outlined what each regional center is doing. I know ECPI was an interest, and Coastal Center has been using ECPI for a few years now, and they have 3 DSPs enrolled in the ECPI program. So that's good to know that we actually have DSPs who are interested in becoming part of the nursing program. Witten Center also has been utilizing ECPI through their career fairs. They also have reached out to Piedmont Tech and have participated in career fairs with SC Works and do. PD is also attending career fairs. They've reached out to local colleges. We also have a nursing director out there at Salibi who has been very critical with assisting with recruiting nursing staff. So our levels out there are pretty good as well as PD. And then Midlands has also been coordinating. The nursing manager there has been coordinating with the ECPI for a while now. So those are pretty much outlines all of our initiatives. We're trying to get out there as much as possible, boots on the ground. We have been approved to post an HR coordinator here in central office, which will oversee all the regional center basic postings such as DSPs and nursing for consistency and to ensure that those applications are moving along to the hiring managers. So that'll free up time for the recruitment managers to kind of have more of a boots on the ground effect out there in the regional centers. So we're trying to utilize every avenue possible for recruitment. Continue to use the referral program for nursing and DSPs. We increased the nursing rates a while back. And I indicated those there. We also have, and you should have, the referral card that we developed here in central office in front of you. The team here developed this card, and we actually were having a difficult time with regards to recruitment as far as internally with our employees, kind of putting the word out there. So this is another avenue for them to be able to give to someone if they're out and about. In stores or wherever they are, or friends and family, they could put their name on the back of it and then give it to the person, and then the person can apply for the position and give it to human resources, and that way we can ensure that our staff are receiving the $100 bonus. So that has been a challenge. It's kind of a hit and miss with that. So we want to definitely give our staff credit for a bonus for referrals. As I mentioned, we've done performance merit-based increases for the agency, and I'm very curious to see our recruitment retention efforts with regards to that. I think you had an interest in the Weekend Warrior program. In late June, operations implemented the recruitment of direct support professionals for temporary weekend schedules with base hourly rate pay of $19.50. This was equivalent to overtime pay of existing DSP workforce at that time. This effort was to mitigate the fatigue of staff that staff were having or experiencing from working consecutive weekends. So this chart indicates how many we've hired. We hired a total of 100, or excuse me, we have a total of 110 active weekend warriors. We hired a total of 283. And then we had temp, I can't speak, 10 to go from temp to FTE. I tried to say that 3 times. So those numbers look pretty good. So they're basically their role is to eliminate that fatigue and allow staff to take time off from working consecutive days and hours. Any questions about that? We are working on our onboarding redesign. HR continues to work on the development of the onboarding ambassador program for central office, and this program will kick off officially January 23.
Explain that to us, what is it?
So the ambassador is, what we've done is updated our onboarding for central office. So we will have an ambassador, 1 or 2 ambassadors assigned from each area. And as we hire new staff, they will be assigned to those ambassadors for a day, and they will provide an overview of their area. And it's an effort.
The person will travel around throughout,
They'll have a they'll have a set schedule. It will be set by HR of, kind of coordinate the schedule of when the new hires can meet with the staff. Right. It's an effort to connect other departments and familiarize, with other areas of the agency and kind of connect those dots to what each area does. So we're excited about that. Just wanted to brag about the employee performance management. Our EPMS were up. We received 88% submissions for our evaluations this year. And we completed a successful upload in skis on behalf of the entire agency. And that is quite a feat in itself. So we're proud of that initiative. We're also working with IT on the development of an electronic document for our position descriptions, planning documents, and evaluations. And that will assist with an easy flow, a paperless system that will hopefully be user-friendly for our managers to be able to complete planning documents and evaluations and position descriptions for postings. So ultimately, we will go paperless with that eventually. And then we hope to roll it out to the regional centers at some point. An exit interview process. We think it's very important to kind of learn why employees are leaving the agency. So this has kind of been in the works for a while. We've talked about it. It's still very much on paper. But this upcoming year, I want to make it a project that we actually develop an electronic exit interview process form. And that'll help us with gathering data trends as it relates to retention, employee engagement, and maybe, establishing any training, future training needs for staff or gaps.
So before, was the exit interviews hit or miss, or did we not have any exit interviews?
We have them, they're on their papers. So when someone announces that they're leaving the agency, we schedule a time for them to come to Human Resources and process out. And they are given a paper exit interview form to complete. And they can either complete it on site or take it with them and submit it to us. So sometimes they complete them, sometimes they don't. I think if they are given to them electronically at the time that they indicate they're leaving the agency, they have time to fill it out and submit directly to Human Resources. It can be a little cumbersome sitting in there and trying to, I think it gives them more freedom to be able to express themselves.
Okay, I have a question. Is there any way that we can hold their last paycheck until they submit that form?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was just trying to think of a way we can.
We cannot ever hold paychecks.
Yeah, wasn't sure.
Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions about that?
In the past, would you think that 25% of people would have filled it out, or do you think less than that?
I think probably less than that. Yeah. We get them, but they are hit and miss. So, I really we do want that feedback to help us improve moving forward. Yeah, it's very important. All right, well, last but not least, we've done a few initiatives here in central office and out in the regional centers. We had a Halloween door decorating contest here in central office, and I have some pictures to show. I know how to use the PowerPoint thing. Are you got it for me? Oh, yeah. See what okay. All right, so I have to give kudos to Morgan. She created this employee engagement PowerPoint. So we had our central office 3rd annual Halloween door decorating contest. We had a few participants. I think all the doors were very interesting and creative. So 3rd place went to budgets. Second was legal. Theirs was quite intricate. It was interesting. And then Haskell was 1st place, I think again this year. So the executive team members pulled together and put in money for a $100 gift card. So $100. We also had the United Way kickoff event. Each regional center kicked it off with cake and lemonade, and we had flyers that went out. We also have bingo this year, and then the pet photo contest. The campaign is being promoted from October to November of this month. And the goal, we set a high goal of $5,000, so we'll see where we are. We do have a lot of reoccurring donations that are done through payroll. At this time, we've approximately raised $800 between bingo and the pet photo contest. So we have a lot of good participation. See, so those are all the pet photos. Oh, good job. Wait a minute. So that's the collage that we created of all the pet photos. We had 46 photos submitted.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone's learning who's winning right now. Like, no one knows at this point. So this is it. So 3rd place was Sadie Rose. The
Really good.
It's cute.
Ram.
place went to the goat. I think that is Nancy Rumbaugh's goat.
It's got a cool goat.
And then 1st place goes to Murphy.
Whose dog is that? Do
It's
we
not
know?
cheating because that's a puppy.
No puppies. Puppies are always cute. Yeah.
Yes.
Who's puppy?
Jackie O'Kane, she has actually adopted 2 puppies, and trying to raise them at one time, and I asked her why she wanted to do that for herself, but
He's cute.
they are adorable, so, yes.
Congratulations to those.
I just want to say about that next year, I would encourage somebody to nominate a horse. Yes. Or else I could nominate, somebody could just name him for the day, have him for the day.
Okay.
Any questions or follow-up? If you have any questions, just let me know. Any additional information you would like, just.
Thank you, Liz. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so
Good
much.
job.
All right.
All right. That was our HR report. Now we're going to talk about outreach, and Harley's giving an update there.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Do you prefer to be doctor?
No, Harley is absolutely fine.
Okay.
Thank you
I
for
I
asking.
always fit to ask.
So I have a few updates that PJ provided that I will share with y'all. So on November 12th, DDSN partnered with the South Carolina State Museum to expand the audience attending their museum accessibility mornings. So the event has grown from our initial participation of about 50 to more than 150 participants. It was a really great opportunity to meet families, especially with young children, during the weeks to provide them information on services, not just that DDSN offers, but that are available to them in South Carolina. And so PJ has been attending, as well as Stephanie Turner, our autism program manager. And at those events, they're providing DDSN resources and information to the families. And so we are pleased with that, the State Museum's response, and are excited to continue attending these events into 2023. On November 22nd, from 12 to 4 p.m. at the Ice House Amphitheater in Lexington, DDSN will participate in Bountiful Harvest and act as a vendor to meet and greet families attending the event. This is a multi-agency event that brings neighbors together while packing free non-perishable boxes of food, and the items will be Thanksgiving themed, so every family can celebrate the holidays. So this is a new initiative, and but one that we're happy to participate in, and uses the opportunity to educate parents and provide information on services. On December 1st of this year, DDSN will sponsor the South Carolina First Steps Summit on Early Childhood. And this conference provides early childhood professionals and advocates, parents, members of the business community, and elected officials an open platform to share strategies, research, and dialogue in order to foster a strong foundation for the children of South Carolina. We know how important it is to work with children as young as we can get to them, right? If they're in need of services, we want to make sure that those families know what those services are and help them with eligibility, or even if it's not a DDSN service, let them know and educate them on what's available to them. So again, a great opportunity to network with partner agencies and with parents as well. On December 7th, 8th, and 9th, DDSN will attend the Columbia's Adventure Museum Sensory Night. So this is another free event that is for families, and it offers a calming and quiet experience after hours to explore the exhibits and programs at the museum. There'll also be a sensory Santa available for families and children to interact with. And so at that event, again, DDSN will be available to provide information on for those families and sensory toys for children. Also on December 8th, as we've already announced, the holiday market will be happening here at DDSN from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So internal planning is in full swing, and a memo went out to providers for vendors to sign up this week. So we're looking forward to hosting that event for the
That's the 8th.
Yes, ma'am, the 8th. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and we encourage the public to come to the office here at DDSN and shop with our consumers.
Yes, and we'll continue to message that out with our partners as well as through social media. Excuse me. And then finally, this has already been announced, but I just want to congratulate Beaufort County again on winning the Golden Palmetto Award, and thanking Commissioners Malphris and Miller for attending that to present the award to Beaufort County. And on a related note, the 2022 nominated for the Silver Palmetto Award to honor city governments that support individuals with disabilities and special needs will be announced through an official memo after the commission meeting today, but I wanted to just put it out there so that those on Teams as well as those in the room will know that official announcement is forthcoming, and that we will be looking forward to the nominations that we will be receiving from city governments. The nomination period will end at the end of December, and we hope we'll award the Silver Palmetto Award next year. That is it. Any questions for me? Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, our next, we're going on to new business, the financial information, Quincy.
So you'll notice it's the same chart as last month during the last commission meeting. Since that meeting, budget staff and myself have been validating the paid claims data from those monthly Medicaid waiver reports. I've gained a comfort level with the data and what is hitting DDSN's books versus what is now hitting DHHS's books since the April 1 flip to fee for service, exactly. And so I've got a couple more programs to validate to make sure there's no crossover between the agency cash and the wash. But I'm pretty confident that the data appears to be accurate. So my goal is to present a little different format in January. Hopefully it's going to be some more detail, give you more context about what's in each of the numbers. But for now, we still have the same format. And if you look at the performance, the year-to-date performance of the adopted 23 spending plan, that's in the amount of $938 million, but I guess it's going to go to $939 million because we just added $600,000 to it. But through October, the agency spent approximately $104 million in agency cash. The direct fee-for-service Medicaid billing expenditures through October are approximately 203 million. So to date, the agency is currently on target with its projections and under budget by 0.51%.
Questions, commissioners?
Good. I do think probably make a motion to approve this once,
Okay,
you know.
no questions. All right, do we have a motion to approve? Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the fiscal year 23 spending plan versus actual 10/31/22, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? No, the ayes have it. This is approved.
Anything else?
Yeah, I've got,
Is
there's a
that the
couple
last thing?
updates. I can update you on the budget submission. We, about 3 weeks ago now, had a meeting with the executive budget office staff, as well as governor's office staff. They were very engaged, asked a lot of questions about our budget submission. I'm hoping that's going to reflect in the governor's executive budget. It's going to be released right before session starts, usually the first week of January. So our focus will now, once we get the executive budget, we'll be moving towards the House Ways and Means. We'll present in January to them, and then we'll present in March to the Senate Finance. So we're gonna start gearing up for that here pretty soon and creating our PowerPoint or presentation. Last updates on cost reports. We've received all but one cost report from the boards. We have identified a workaround because one of the boards is having some technical issues with their system. So we're working through that. We're about 2 weeks out from our deadline. I'm happy to say we're on target and we should meet that deadline. And other than that, I have nothing else for you guys today, unless you have questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Quincy. We appreciate it. All right, next, Dr. Fries, will give director.
Just a few things. Want to highlight that we did just receive notification in the last couple of days from MMO that our contract extension with our current QIO Alliant has been approved through September 30th. Staff are also very much working on an updated RFP for the QIO contract for after that contract term will expire. We will share as we make more progress on that. Want to provide an update on the crisis intervention and stabilization that this commission approved us to stand up. Just want to note that building improvements are underway at Walnut at Midlands. And we have been recruiting for all of those positions. We'll start some interviews later this month and in December. And again, on that, we'll provide updates as we're able to provide this service, but we're working hard to get that because we know it is critical. This is really from Lori, but we have a conflict-free case management update. As you all likely know, in June of 21, providers began the process of identifying participants whose services were in conflict as required by federal regulation. Conflict-free case management requires that assessment and coordination of services is provided separately from the delivery of services. All providers who had participants who were in conflict submitted a transition plan to DDSN, and then once that plan was approved, they began implementation, and we established the following timelines. By the end of 21, 20% of participants who were in conflict, we wanted to deconflict. By the end of this year, it's 50%, and to have everyone be deconflicted by 12/31/23. We have been ahead of schedule on statewide deconflicting, and communication was sent this month to providers requesting a report on their transition progress by early January, and a formal report on statewide progress must be submitted to HHS in February of 23. So we'll provide you all an update at that time. Want to highlight that we have contracted with Intellectability to provide a learning management system that'll be accessible via our website. We're really excited about that. They're currently working on designing a med tech training that's specific to South Carolina, also trauma-informed care. We'll be working with providers to identify additional training needs, as well as working with our quality management division's data.
And we will update providers as those trainings become available and give them information about how to access the LMS. So that will be a great opportunity for the network. Just two more quick things. Want to highlight that we continue to make progress on regional center improvements that you all approved with the spending plan in August. At Coastal Center, we've Highlands drain line repairs, also roof replacements on 3 roofs. At Midlands, I already mentioned that we've been making improvements to Walnut, where we hope to do the crisis intervention and stabilization that requires multiple bathroom renovations. Also have begun work on the pool and fill. At PD, we see the Pecan bathroom renovations and roof replacements for both Pecan and Mulberry are in the works. And at Witten, we have flooring replacements and roof replacements that are in the works. And we're doing evaluation and work towards paving repairs and site work at all of those regional centers. So just want you to know we're making progress. There are supply chain challenges, but we are making progress with the allowance that you gave us. And finally, I want to remind everyone that we have a monthly provider meeting. It is not next week because of the holiday. It will be Monday, November 28th at 2 p.m. And we encourage providers to send us topics that you all would like to discuss at forum agenda and FAQ@ddsn.sc.gov. The and is the ampersand.
Okay, is that all right? As we close out today, I want to, I just found a sheet that was hidden up under my stuff. We do have some new hires at DDSN, and I do want to announce them so that you will know, the commissioners will know who they are. On September 3rd, Jana Brown came to work as a network technician. She's tier 2 IT systems and central office is where she's located. Valerie Duncan is our new director of procurement. She works in the procurement and supply division down here in central office. On November 2nd, Michael Bailey came to work for us as a systems programmer, developer 1, ITD, he's in the central office. Erica Crawford came to work as a constituent services coordinator, quality management in central office. Trina Sawyer is a direct support professional 1 on the autism division. She's PD autism CTH, is that correct? And then Teresa Merritt is also a direct support professional in our autism division in the Piedmont Autism CTH. On the 14th, Sharon Roberts came to work for us as the benefits manager down in HR central office. And there was one person that was not at our last meeting after when I introduced Quincy. It was our autism director.
Oh, yes. So, and she started in August, so that's probably why she's not listed, but Stephanie Turner.
Yes, Stephanie Turner actually started with us in August. She was not able to be at our last meeting, but I did announce her last time. So she's our new autism director. So those are the new hires for DDSN for the last quarter, kind of. And wanted to talk with you real quick. We are not planning to have a meeting in the month of December. We felt like our staff needed a little time off. They've worked really hard, and they work very hard to get us ready for these meetings on a monthly basis as far as committee meetings are concerned that lead up to these meetings. So we're going to take the month of December off, commissioners. And so we will meet back here in January, but January is going to start a busy time for us. As you all know, Commissioner Thomas had said that he wanted to do a listening session with our providers about the, give me a minute, Commissioner Thomas, the bill that would make DDSN a cabinet agency as opposed to a commission agency. Is that correct? And so what we had looked at is possibly doing that on the afternoon, like our next meeting is on Thursday, January 19th, 2022. So we would have our morning meeting, and then we've got to be here the next day for strategic planning workshop. So what we're thinking about is using that afternoon to meet with our providers that Thursday afternoon so we don't waste any time. So what we're thinking is maybe having the morning meeting and then taking a break and leaving for lunch and coming back here about 2:00 to meet with providers. Is that suitable with you all as a commission? And have that meeting with providers. We're going to work it out where the providers could either come here and meet with us, or the providers will be able to communicate through the internet. So the IT staff will work on that. And so we want to encourage our providers, start thinking about that particular topic and give us your feedback. How do you feel about it? What do you think we should do? What are the pros? What are the cons? So we want to begin looking at that process. So that will be the afternoon of January the 19th, which is our next meeting at 10:00. And then on the next day, we will have a work session with our strategic planning group as a commission. I do want to remind everyone at the holiday market, again, on the 8th here at DDSN headquarters. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also want to remind you of the Technology Summit. In January, go ahead and put that on your calendars for January 25th from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. up at the Dre Event Center in Spartanburg. I think all of those are great events and things for us to be involved in. We do wish you a very happy Merry Christmas and a happy holidays and a happy New Year. And we look forward to seeing you again on the 19th. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, before we do that,
Oh, go
can I
ahead.
say
Sure.
that I think it'd be prudent for us to make sure that the bill is actually introduced in January. And we should look at the bill before we decide what the public comment should be, because we don't know if it's going to be introduced in January.
Well, we know, in fact, you were in the meeting from the legislative committee. We know that they're coming up with a proposal. Now, whether it will include that or not, I don't know, but I know they will be discussing it. I think since it was introduced last time, it would be safe to say that it will be a subject that the legislature will be considering. And since it's such a big deal, I think to have their input, to see what they think, and, from our perspective, maybe to say it could have, some repercussions as to how communication takes place and all that. So I just like to hear it, because many of us will be going to subcommittee meetings for the bill that we know will be introduced. And, if it goes to a cabinet, then there are just a lot of questions that need to be answered that many of us will be asking the senators, how will this work? And have you considered this? And can we make sure that this idea is put into the legislation? And who knows, maybe even from some of these groups, they'll have some ideas for us, so that come January, February, we will know. So I would suggest that,
Before the bill's introduced, you think we should do this?
yeah, because it's I mean,
They pre-filed.
it's pre-filed. It might move quickly. And so we want to be ahead of this, not behind it. Doesn't do any good if they take it up in subcommittee and then they're in full committee, it's already on the floor. By the time we're getting input, it's too late.
So that is the plan. Yes, sir.
We had a family present us 2 months ago about an untenable situation with an adolescent that we were going to have to place out of state. Any update on that?
Sure. Actually, I'm looking to Lori. Lori, can you give us an update? Because I know there was just a call yesterday.
Sure. So we've been working really diligently to try to find some place that's suitable for this young man. We did have an option of an out-of-state placement, as well as we reached out to some providers within South Carolina to try to see if they were interested in designing a program for him that we might be able to use the single case agreement. I don't know if you remember that policy, to do something a little bit creative with him. So we have, some options, and we're just kind of working with the family on those. So I can update you more later. I'm not sure how much we want to talk about him in a public meeting.
Thank you. That's a great question. Any other questions, commissioners? All right. Then let's move forward. Do I have a motion to adjourn? We got a motion and a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Happy holidays.